Hello, thank you for watching my channel today. My name's Sarah and my channel is called Your True Self. Today I am filming my wrap up for the month of July. In terms of numbers, not a bad month. I read 7 books in July. So the first one was an audiobook, which was Howard's End by Ian Forster. The reason that I wanted to read this was because I watched the BBC adaptation about 4 years ago maybe, and I really enjoyed it, and I've always wanted to read the book ever since, and I think I got it in one of their £3 sales. So I really enjoyed this, and it was a 4-star read. It's basically revolving around 2 families. So there's the Schlegel family, who are 2 sisters and a brother who were grown up, but their parents have died and they all live together. And then there's the Wilcox family, who are very like domineering, rich family, who sort of feel like everybody needs to listen to what they have to say and they're right about everything. And it's the intermingling of the 2 families and how when they try and help somebody who's in a less privileged position than them, they end up messing everything up. And it kind of looks at lots of things. There's a lot of comedy in it. There's a lot of satire in it, but there's also sort of quite a lot of ethics, like talking about class and about the class system and how people look down on other people and how they think that if they've got more money they obviously know better and all that kind of thing. So I really enjoyed it. I have read one other Ian Forster. I've read A Room with a View, but I'd like to read more because that was really good. The second book I read, let me just grab it. So this was a reread, and this was for Reading Women's Challenge, was reread a favourite, and I've wanted to read this whole series again for ages. This is the first one. This is The Clan of the Cave Bear by Jean M. Al, which was written in, I'm going to hold it that side. It was written in the 80s, or even maybe 1980. And so I was a bit nervous going in case there's some stuff which makes me kind of cringe now. But it's set in prehistoric times. And it follows a girl called Ayla, who is what's now called, I think, early modern human, but was then called a Cro-Magnon when this was written. And she is in an earthquake when she's a child, very young, about 5 years old, and all her family dies, and she is rescued by a group called the Clan of the Cave Bear, who are Neanderthals. And it basically, she is raised by the Neanderthals, and she learns a lot about them and their customs and their language and all of that kind of thing. So this book, to start with, it wasn't like I remembered. Like, to start with, it was more like reading a little bit too much factual information, and I didn't remember it being like that at all. But then after about the first 50 pages or so, it got back into the story that I really remembered and that I loved so much when I was growing up. The one thing I would say is that there is the highest status man in the clan is he's called the Magor, which means like the healer or sort of spiritual leader of the group, and he was born with disfigurements, and it refers to him as being crippled the whole time. And I hate that obviously that's a term that we'd never use anymore. I don't know if that was a commonly used term in the 1980s, but it certainly isn't now. So I didn't like that term, and it said it way too often. Like I think it got less throughout the book, but at the beginning it was just constantly saying the crippled man. And I was just like, okay, we get it. It's like, he's got disfigurements, you don't have to say it every time you talk about him. And so I found that really uncomfortable. But other than that, I really loved this book. And the thing I loved the most, I think, was learning about like the customs and the ceremonies and the beliefs. Like, for instance, they believe that every person has like an animal spirit, which is their totem, which they get assigned at birth. And they believe that when 2 people mate, which means like are married, that they can only have children if the man's totem can defeat the woman's totem, and they don't realise it's anything to do with sex, having children, stuff like that. So that's really interesting, and I loved hearing about the ceremonies and the herb gathering and the medicines and the cave and everything, and I really, really loved it. And I can't wait to reread the rest of the series. So this was a 5-star, but like I say, there is some uncomfortable terminology in the book. Then I read one which I really didn't like. So this was for the prompt of read an Arab women in translation, and this was Straight from the Horse's Mouth by Meryem Alaoui. This one, she is from Morocco. That's it, Morocco. So I had a complete blank. So she's from Morocco. The book's set in Morocco, and it follows our main character, whose name I can't even remember. And she is a prostitute, and we basically like learn about her life, a bit about how she became a sex worker, what it's like for her being a sex worker, and then how her life changes when she gets a part in a film. And I really didn't like this book because she is very she's just a really unlikable character. She is quite bitter about everything. She makes everything seem quite grotesque, and I get that her job is like really, really hard. I get that, but she doesn't find anything nice in life at all, really. She doesn't treat people nicely. She doesn't treat her daughter nicely or her mum. She's just not a nice person at all. And it made me realise, like reading this, that whilst I don't have to like every single character in a book, there has to be something hopeful in a book, and something where a character like grows and develops. I think my favourite books are when the character kind of goes on a journey and grows in some way, and where there's like hope in the book and there is beauty as well. And there just wasn't any of that in this book. And I can do grim books, I can do bleak kind of books, but this was just didn't enjoy it at all. I gave it 2 stars, probably downgraded it to a 1 star because I only finished it so I could tick the prompt off, otherwise I would have DNF'd it. I just didn't like it at all, unfortunately. But I did learn something that I do like, and that's kind of a must for me in a book. Then I really wanted something that was a bit like light and something that was more magical, which is why I chose the next book, which I've had for quite a while, and this is I'd say it's probably like young YA, not quite middle grade, I'm not sure, but that is this book, which is Under a Dancing Star by Laura Wood, and I love the front cover of this book. It's beautiful. This is a book that I saw recommended on Lucy Powery's channel, and this is following mainly two people. So there's Bee and there's Ben, and Bee is living in the 1930s in a really strict household. Her parents are very stifling. She's not really interested in marriage and stuff, but her parents are kind of constantly introducing her to eligible bachelors and hoping that she'll save the family fortunes and carry on their family name and all that kind of stuff. And she feels very stifled. She's really interested in she's really interested in naturalism and like zoology and that kind of thing, botany. And she's not given, her parents are like, that's stuff that boys do, like you shouldn't be like getting dirty and going and getting insects and things out the garden, that's just not the done thing. So anyway, she gets an opportunity. They kind of want to send her away, and she goes to stay with her uncle in Italy, and she thinks she's like, oh my god, I can't believe I get to go on this massive adventure. So she goes to their uncle's place, and it turns out that his wife is running sort of like an artist's retreat there. So there's like artists coming and going. It's quite bohemian. It's a completely different world to what she's used to. And she meets a guy called Ben, and they decide to have an experiment whether they can whether he can try and woo her, but they mustn't fall in love with each other. There's like a summer romance going on through it as well. There's also some political stuff, because obviously the Second World War's brewing, and her uncle's getting involved in some very right-wing ideas, which is also a big problem, obviously. So it's got a bit of sort of more serious matter thrown in as well. I gave it, I think, 3.5 stars, so I really enjoyed it. It didn't blow me away, but it was a really nice read, and it was very enjoyable compared to the one before. Then so the next one was one I'd never heard of, but I am a Patreon of Morgan Long's, who's one of my favourite YouTubers, and she has a Patreon book club. And for the Patreon book club this month, she always gives us a choice of 3 books and we have to vote for one. This one won, and I probably wouldn't have ever picked it up, but I loved it, and it was The Bookish Life of Nina Hill by Abbi Waxman. So I listened to this on Audible. I really do think with certain books you get more out of the Audible than you would reading it, and I feel like this might be one of those books because I loved the narrator. So Nina is an introvert. She's quite shy. She works at a bookstore which is struggling to survive. It's set in the States, and she is on a quiz team, so she goes round to different bars and pubs and stuff doing trivia. She one second. Oh, bit noisy downstairs. I'm just going to shut the door 1 second. She I lost my train of thought now. She runs book clubs at her work, but she lives on her own, and she with her cat, and she very much likes scheduling everything. So she has, every day we get like a little bit out of her sort of planner, and it will say like going to work today, after work I'm going to go to the gym or come home and read or whatever. I'm going to buy this from the shop and I'm going to eat this. And it's kind of a little bit like sort of Bridget Jones, like how it's got that little bit in. And then, then she likes planning, she likes scheduling. Then there's a couple of things that happen. So these aren't massive spoilers because they happen early on in the book. One is that she finds out that her birth father, who she never knew, has died, and she's been asked to go to a will reading, and she finds out she's got like a big family that she never knew about. And the second thing is there's a guy on another trivia team who she likes, and she has to decide what to do about that. And she has anxiety as well, so it talks about her anxiety. It's a really kind of charming, cosy, lovely, bookish book. There's a lot of book talk in there, and it's just really lovely. Like, if you want a book that will make you feel cosy, happy, cheerful about books, and will just the complete opposite of Straight from the Horse's Mouth, basically, where it fills you with kind of joy and hope and lovely things, then I definitely recommend this book. And I really want to check out more of what Abbi Waxman has written, because I'd never heard of her before, and this was a 5-star read for me. So the next one is one that I've heard different things about on BookTube, but the reason I wanted to read it was because Natalie Meree, she recommended it highly, and it's also been shortlisted for the Miles Franklin Award this year, and that is The Rain Heron by Robbie Arnott. So this one I buddy read with Joe Smith, and we both really enjoyed it. It's a very difficult book to explain in terms of what it's about, because there's magical realism in there. So basically, how can I describe it? So the rain heron is a bird which is made from water. So it can disappear into water. It can come out as kind of steam or droplets of water, and you can see it, but it's obviously not a solid image, and it always constantly drips water as well. And if you're in favour with the rain heron, it brings you good things. So for instance, if it lives on your farm will be very prosperous and you'll do very well. If you try and harm it in any way, it will peck your eyes out. So our main character, Wren, is she has seen the rain heron when she was a child. Her grandmother took her there. And Wren we know that this is set in Australia, and we know there's been some kind of army takeover in Australia, and it sounds like it's quite a scary place, and she's sort of living off the land on her own as kind of like a hermit. And one day some soldiers come, and the lead soldier, female soldier, is saying to her, like, you have to help us find the rain heron, otherwise, like, we'll kill you. So don't want to give too many spoilers away, but it kind of goes from there and what happens. And it's basically, it talks about sort of environmental disaster, about but not, it's not, I wouldn't call it like a cli-fi book really. It's kind of there, but it's not in your face. There's the magical realism of the rain heron. There's this sort of man's need to conquer and take everything for himself, and the consequences of doing that rather than leaving nature be. And there's like friendships in here, and really, it's so hard to actually describe it. It talks about like family relationships, past trauma. I love this cover. It's just absolutely stunning. I love this cover. And it's not a long book. It's like under 300 pages, I think. Yeah, 269. The writing is absolutely beautiful. Like, it's that, what I always call the perfect balance of being easy to read and beautifully written. So I really loved it. I'm finding it really hard to put into words, actually, like concrete thoughts, because of how hard it is to describe. But I gave this one 4 stars, and I would definitely read Flames by Robbie Arnott, which is his other book. And then the final book that I read, the final book that I read in July was Yeats's Ballad by Magda Szabó. So this was for the prompt, read an Eastern European book. I can't remember if it said in translation or not, but it is in translation. So it's from Magda Szabó is from Hungary, and it's in translation. This was a really, really good book. I've given it back to the library now, so I can't hold it up, so I'll just insert a picture. But basically, this is a book with very little plot, but very in-depth character studies, and I like that. Wouldn't want to read that every time, but I do like a slow burn with, you know, in-depth character studies. So this is about a family. There's Etta, who is the mum, and what's the dad called? Can't remember. The dad, which I can't remember his name, and Yeatsa is their daughter, and she is extremely clever, and they live in a very rural place in Hungary. Like, they don't have running water. They don't have like any modern gadgets. Like, she bought her mum a toaster, and her mum was like, what is this? Like, I don't trust this. I'm just going to carry on toasting my bread over the fire. So the parents love living in this very like rural Hungary. And Yeatsa is very clever. She goes to med school. She becomes a doctor. She's like excellently she's excellent and renowned in her field. And she's working in Budapest. And she was married, but her husband left her, but her husband is still very close to her family. And basically, like, Yeatsa's dad dies early on in the book. He's dying right at the beginning of the book, and she takes Etty, her mum, to Budapest to live with her because she thinks she's doing the right thing by she sort of organises everything for her mum. She's kind of portrays her mum as not being capable of doing anything for herself. And she says, come with me, mum, I've booked your tickets, this is when we're going, you don't need to worry about the house, I'll sort out the house, I'll do everything for you, you just come and live with me. And her mum is just uprooted and doesn't know how to fit into her new life. So she never gets a chance to go through her husband's things. She doesn't get a chance to say goodbye to their dog or their house. She doesn't know what her role is in Budapest. She wants to take care of her daughter, but her daughter has like a housekeeper, and so she doesn't know what to do with her time. She doesn't have to work anymore. She's like really like lost basically. And it just follows her mum, Yeatsa, Yeatsa's ex-husband and her current partner, in just how they all sort of interact with each other and what happens basically. So I gave this 5 stars because I just thought that the writing was brilliant. I think it was written in the 1960s, but it could have easily been written in the modern day. And yeah, the talent of the author's writing was phenomenal. I'd definitely read more. I think there's only 1 or 2 of her books translated into English, but her talent was amazing. Her writing was gorgeous. Like, I really, really loved this book, and I'd highly recommend it. So yes, that's all of the books that I read in the month of July. Tell me if you've read any of those or if you have any thoughts on them at all. And I hope you have a lovely week, and I'll speak to you all soon. Bye.